The stagnation and reform of the Ottoman Empire lasted between 1683 to 1827 and was followed by its decline and modernization. The Sultanate of Women and Koprulu era were significant in this period. Despite her few territorial gains such as Crete, there were almost continuous rebellions in Anatolia and vast territories were lost again to Safavid Persia, once being conquered from them. The period is marked by weak and semi-mad sultans and incapable grand viziers. The Valida sultans who acted like queen regent were the powerful figures of the period. Powerful women in the harem picked favorites for high office and corruption rather than competence ruled. Koprulu era 1683 to 1699, 1687 to 1691, Suleiman II in 1686. The Habsburgs began occupying parts of modern Serbia. The Janissaries' revolt continued during the early phase of Suleiman's reign. Meanwhile, Prince Eugene of Savoy led Austrian forces to victories in the Great Turkish War. Suleiman II, who was an ailing sultan, appointed Koprulu Faisal Mustafa Pasha as the Grand Vizier. This was a wise choice, for Faisal Mustafa Pasha temporarily changed the course of events by recapturing the important fort of Belgrade in 1691. 1691 to 1695, Ahmet II Koprulu Faisal Mustafa Pasha's death during the Battle of Slankamen was a great loss for the Ottoman side. Ottoman Empire lost all Hungary except Banat, but Ottoman Crimean side was more successful in the Polish front. Nevertheless, when Russia also joined the Allies, Ottomans had to fight in Azov fort also. Territorial losses 1699 to 1827. From about 1699 to 1792 saw the weakening of multiple dimensions of the aging empire. It lost more and more capabilities and fell further and further behind Europe. Historians often use the start and end dates of the decline as the Treaty of Karlowitz and Treaty of Jassy, respectively, with the decline proceeding in a continuous rather than an abrupt manner between these dates, lasting nearly 100 years. The period can be seen as starting in 1683 with the disastrous defeat at Vienna. Heavy pressure came from the growing Russian Empire. Ottoman political debates were dominated by pessimism regarding the economic problems and defeats. The empire tried to catch up to the Western world by military reforms which proved to be ineffective in the long run. 1695 to 1703, Mustafa II. Although Mustafa II, last of campaigning sultans, won a few minor victories, he suffered a devastating loss in the Battle of Zenta by Prince Eugene of Savoy of Austria. By 1699, Ottoman Hungary had been conquered by the Austrians. The Treaty of Karlowitz was signed that year. By this treaty, Mustafa II ceded Hungary and Transylvania to Austria, Morea to the Venetian Republic, and withdrew Turkish forces from Polish Podolia. Also during this reign, Peter I of Russia captured the Black Sea fortress of Azov from the Turks. Mustafa was dethroned during the revolt named the Edirne event. Tulip era 1718-1730, 1703-1730. Ahmed III. In 1710, Charles XII of Sweden convinced Sultan Ahmed III to declare war against Russia, and the Ottoman forces under Baltachi Mehmet Pasha won a major victory at the Battle of Prut. In the subsequent treaty, Russia returned Azov to the Ottomans, agreed to demolish the fortress of Taganrog and others in the area, and to stop interfering with the affairs of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth or Cossacks. Discontent at the leniency of these terms was so strong at Constantinople that it nearly brought on a renewal of the war. In 1715, Morea was taken from the Venetians. This led to hostilities with Austria, in which the Ottoman Empire had an unsuccessful outcome, and Belgrade fell into the hands of Austria in 1717. Through the mediation of England and the Netherlands, the Peace of Passarowitz was concluded in 1718, by which Turkey retained her conquest from the Venetians, but lost Banat. During the course of the Persian War, the Turks made successive conquests with little resistance from Persian armies. though often impeded by the nature of the country and the fierce spirit of the native tribes. After a few years, however, the war became less favorable to Ottoman ambition. The celebrated Persian military leader Nadir Qomli Khan gained his first renown by exploits against the enemies of Shah Tahmasp. Most of Ahmet's reign was the sub-period known as Tulip period. The period was marked by a high taste of architecture, literature, and luxury, as well as the first examples of industrial productions. But the social problems peaked, and after the revolt of Patrona Halil Ahmet was dethroned. 1730 to 1754 Mahmud I. Although Mahmud was brought to the throne by the civil strife engendered by Patrona Halil, he did not espouse Halil's anti-reform agenda. In fact, much of his first year as Sultan was spent in dealing with the reactionary forces unleashed by Halil. Eventually, on the 24th of November 1731, he was forced to execute Halil and his main followers, whereupon the rebellion ceased. In 1731, a dispute arose as to the right of dominion over the Circassians of the Cappatus, a region about halfway between the Euxine and the Caspian Sea, near the course of the river Terek. The Russians claimed the Cappatus as lands of Russian subjects. They asserted that the Circassians were originally Cossacks of the Ukraine, who migrated to the neighborhood of the Russian city Turkey, from which they took their name of Circassians, or Circassians. Thence the Circassians removed to the neighborhood of Kuban, still, however, retaining their Christian creed and their allegiance to the Tsar. The story tells further that the tyranny of the Crim Tatars forced the Circassians to become Muslims, to migrate farther eastward to the Cappatus, but, nevertheless, the Circassians were still to be regarded as subjects of their original earthly sovereign, and that the land which they occupied became the Tsar's territory. This political ethnology had but little influence upon the Turks, especially as the Tsar had, in a letter written 9 years previously, acknowledged the sovereignty of the Sultan over the Circassians. The Russian war was fought primarily in the Crimea and the Danubian principalities. In this war, the Russian commander von Münnich routed Mahmud I's Crimean Tatar vassals and then led his forces across the Dniestr, bringing much of Bessarabia under Russian control. The Austrians, however, did not fare as well, as Ottoman forces brought Belgrade and northern Serbia back under their control. The Persian Wars saw Ottoman forces ranged against the military genius of Nadir Shah. The Turks managed to retain control of Baghdad, but Armenia, Azerbaijan and Georgia fell back within the Persian sphere of influence. 1754 to 1757 Osman III. Osman's short term was marked with Sultan's peculiarities such as a dislike for women's companionship and intolerance of Jewish people. During his reign there were several big fires in Istanbul, the capital. In the last year of his reign, he appointed Koka Recep Pasha, an able and peaceful vizier, as the Grand Vizier, which was a wise decision. 1757 to 1774 Mustafa III. After the death of Koka Recep Pasha in 1763, the Sultan Mustafa III governed by himself. He was not good at selecting councillors and commanders. He was a headstrong and hasty man, which contributed to his poor decisions. However, he was very industrious and talented, and was dedicated to promoting the interests of the Ottoman Empire. 1774 to 1789 Abdul Hameed I. In 1774, after a catastrophic war with Russia, the Ottomans were compelled to sign the Treaty of Kutchuk-Kainarji. 1789 to 1807 Selim III. The first signs of dissolution were seen during the reign of Selim III. At the end of another war against the coalition of Austria and Russia, the empire signed the Treaty of Sistova and the Treaty of Jassy. After the defeat, Selim III attempted to improve administrative efficiency through reform, but was dethroned by the Kabakchi Mustafa rebellion when he tried to create a new army and navy. 1807 to 1808 Mustafa IV. After the rebellion of Kabakchi Mustafa, the reformist Sultan Selim III was dethroned in 1807. The new Sultan, Mustafa IV, opposed all reform projects. Mustafa's reign was however short. The reformist Alemdar Mustafa Pasha dethroned him with the intention of re-enthroning Selim III. However, Selim was killed by Mustafa IV and Mahmud II was enthroned in his stead. Character of the period. Stephen Lee argues that decline was relentless from 1566 to 1699, interrupted by a few short revivals. The decline gathered speed so that the empire in 1699 was a mere shadow of that which intimidated East and West alike in 1566, although there are dissenting scholars. Most historians point to degenerate sultans, incompetent grand viziers, debilitated and ill-equipped armies, corrupt officials, avaricious speculators, grasping enemies and treacherous friends. The main cause was a failure of leadership, as the first 10 sultans from 1292 to 1566, with one exception, had been both efficient administrators and capable military rulers. The next 13 sultans from 1566 to 1703, with 2 exceptions, were apathetical or incompetent rulers. In a highly centralized system, the failure at the center proved fatal. A direct result was the strengthening of provincial elites who increasingly ignored Constantinople. Secondly, the military strength and technology of European enemies grew stronger and stronger, while the Ottoman armies and arms scarcely improved. Finally, the Ottoman economic system grew distorted and impoverished, as war caused inflation, world trade moved in other directions, and the deterioration of law and order made economic progress difficult. Bibliography. Kinross, Patrick Balfour Barron, and John Patrick Douglas Balfour Kinross. The Ottoman Centuries. The Rise and Fall of the Turkish Empire. Popular History. Gallery. Suleiman II, Ahmet II, Mustafa II, Mustafa II, Ahmet III, Mahmud I, Osman III, Mustafa III, Abdul Hameed I, Selim III.